What would you risk to save a stranger's life? On a bitter December evening in a small Minnesota town, the wind howled across Lake Winona, its frozen surface glinting under a fading sun. Jamal Carter, a lanky 15-year-old with a quiet strength, trudged home from his after-school job at the local diner. His hands were stuffed deep in his worn jacket, his mind heavy with the usual worries: school, his mom's long shifts at the hospital, and the whispers of classmates who never let him forget he was one of the few black kids in town. The lake was a shortcut, a path he'd taken 100 times. But today something felt off. A faint cry pierced the wind, sharp and desperate. Jamal froze, scanning the ice. There, near the center, a small figure thrashed in a dark patch of broken ice. A girl, no older than 10, her mittened hands clawing at the jagged edges. Her screams were weakening, her body sinking. Jamal's heart pounded. He'd seen enough winters to know the ice was treacherous, thinning unpredictably. No one else was around, no cars, no voices, just the wind and her fading cries. He sprinted to the lake's edge, his sneakers slipping on the snow. His eyes locked on a coil of rope tied to a nearby tree, left by some forgotten fisherman. With trembling hands, he knotted it around his waist, tying the other into the trunk. Every second felt like a lifetime. He crawled across the ice, his breath ragged, the cold biting through his jeans. The girl's face was pale, her lips blue, her eyes wide with terror. "Hold on," Jamal shouted, his voice cracking. The ice groaned beneath him, threatening to give way. He reached the hole, plunged his arms into the freezing water, and grabbed her coat. His muscles burned as he pulled, her small frame heavy with soaked clothes. The ice cracked louder, a sickening sound, but he didn't stop. With a final heave, he dragged her onto the ice, both collapsing in a shivering heap. He didn't know her name, but he carried her to the shore, her small body trembling against his. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have seen them. Paramedics swarmed, wrapping the girl in blankets. Jamal stood back, soaked and shaking, watching as they took her away. A paramedic clapped his shoulder, muttering, "You're a hero, kid." But Jamal just wanted to go home. The next morning, Jamal woke to a strange warmth in his chest, like a spark he couldn't explain. His mom, bleary-eyed from her night shift, was beaming at him over breakfast. "You're all over the news, baby," she said, showing him her phone. The headline read, "Local teen saves girl from icy lake." He shrugged, embarrassed, but the spark grew brighter. At school, things were different. Kids who'd ignored him now stared in awe. Teachers shook his hand. But the real surprise came at lunch. A man in a worn coat, with kind eyes and a graying beard, approached him in the cafeteria. "You're Jamal, right?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. "I'm Mr. Ellis. I saw what you did." Jamal nodded, unsure. Mr. Ellis wasn't a teacher or anyone he recognized. The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "That girl you saved? She's my niece, Lily, and I owe you more than words." He slipped a small, tarnished key into Jamal's hand. "This opens something special. Find the old oak by the lake at dusk." Jamal's pulse quickened. Was this a prank? But Mr. Ellis's eyes held a quiet certainty, and before Jamal could ask more, the man was gone. That evening, driven by curiosity, Jamal returned to the lake. The oak stood alone, its gnarled roots twisting into the earth. He spotted a small, hidden hollow in its trunk, barely visible. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed but glowing faintly, as if alive. When he opened it, words shimmered into view, not written, but forming in his mind. They told a story of courage, of a boy who'd risked everything for another. As he read, the spark in his chest flared, and the world around him shifted. The lake gleamed with colors he'd never seen, blues and golds dancing on the ice. The wind carried whispers of gratitude, not just from Lily, but from others he'd never met. The book was no ordinary thing. It was a record of selfless acts, and Jamal's name was now etched within it. Each night, it revealed new stories, new lessons, guiding him to small ways he could help a thirst neighbor needing groceries, a classmate struggling in silence. With every act, the spark grew, and so did his confidence, his purpose. The town noticed. Jamal, once invisible, became a quiet force, organizing food drives, tutoring younger kids, speaking up when no one else would. The book wasn't magic in the fairy tale sense. It was a mirror, reflecting the power he'd always had. Saving Lily hadn't just changed her life, it had unlocked his. Years later, as a young man, Jamal stood by the lake again, the book in his hands. He was heading to college, a scholarship in his pocket, his mom's proud tears still fresh in his memory. The key, now worn from years of use, hung around his neck. He didn't need the book anymore. Its lessons were part of him. But he left it in the oak for the next soul brave enough to risk everything. What would you risk to find your own spark? Yindi.